Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Coaches Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Neid, and today, as usual, we are brought to you by Coaches Corner University. Use code podcast300 to save $300 off of our continuing education platform, the Education Collective, with close to 200 hours of lecture content and the study hall community. We're also expanding our course library, so oh my goodness, I'm on fire today. You can tell that I do a ton of ad reads, eh? We're
You're doing
also
great.
expanding our course library, so stay tuned for some new courses that are accredited for CEUs through NASM and the NSCA. Those will be collaborated with industry experts as usual. We're also sponsored by TC Nutrition, Barefoot Shoes, and Bacon and Barbells. You can find links to those discount codes in the description below. Today, my guest is a dear friend of mine, owner of the Strength Girl, Mia Harris. Mia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Paul, for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's my pleasure. You got to experience perhaps the worst ad read I've ever done.
Hey, you did great. You powered through. That's all that matters.
Yeah, we don't do edits on this podcast, so what you
Perfect.
say can and will be put in public.
Love it.
You want to give people a little bit of a background on who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, like you said, my name is Mia, and I'm the owner of the Strength Girl. And essentially, I help high achieving, ambitious women ditch the scale and weight loss obsession so that they can learn how to fall in love with lifting weights while also taking care of their mind, body, and soul. So, I strongly
Love that.
believe that it's much more empowering to focus on becoming your strongest self versus your smallest.
Okay, so we're going to jump right into some questions because number one, that resonates so much with a lot of the goals that the women that we work with have, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're tied to this idea that smaller is better,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't necessarily see weight training initially as a tool to improve the rest of their lives. It sounds to me like the way you described your business is, you're using training as a tool, but it's really about personal development.
Absolutely. Personal development, mindset practices, healthy habit implementation, movement. Those are all the catalysts that I use within my coaching practice to help people get stronger physically, mentally, and emotionally. Because we know it's not just about the physical aspect, there's so much more to it than that. And I think it goes beyond just like our outer appearance or that external shell to really see changes internally as well.
So it's been my experience, having been in coaching for a lot of time. I won't age myself anymore.
You already did on my podcast, so it's
I did,
fine.
yeah. That in most cases, our journey to help others is centered around our own journey. So, what about your journey led you to a place where you felt so compelled to serve women in this way?
Yeah, I grew up a competitive athlete. So I was a competitive dancer and a competitive soccer player, which required two very different body types. As a competitive dancer, you're meant to be tall, lean, elegant. And as a competitive soccer player, you're more short, stocky, and built. And that's more so the image that I portrayed. And in order to become the best within my sports, and I love dance more than anything. Soccer kind of was just more of the another outlet for me conditioning wise to help me with my dance.
Okay.
But I knew that if I wanted to take it to the next level within my dance career, that I had to portray or look a certain way in order to be taken seriously. And that's when I decided to take matters into my own hands and try and fit the ideal dance body standards. And that was my first mistake because I did everything quote unquote wrong. And it was coming from a place of like self-hatred versus a place of like, I love myself and I'm doing this to become the best version of myself. It was more so
Mhm.
for superficial reasons and to be accepted by my peers and within the dance world.
So you hit on a few really key topics for me and a lot of the narrative that I try to have around fitness. And the first one being you tried and you did everything wrong. And I think and you specified that you had all the best intentions because you wanted to achieve something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you thought, well, with the information that I have available, I need to do X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Hindsight's always 2020. We look back, we're like, well, that was fucking dumb.
Yeah.
And we pay the price for it afterwards, right? You
Still paying the price for it.
know, right. So what were maybe some mistakes that you see within your own journey that are mirrored in the clients that you're working with?
Yeah. So at that time, I took to the whole under eating, under fueling, over exercising route and would spend, 2 hours at a time running on the treadmill, fueling myself with 1,200 calories a day and just like completely running my body into the ground. I was taking no rest days and then wondering why, I was getting injured all the time. My hair was falling out in clumps. I lost my period for a year. Um, and it just, the list goes on. I was sick all the time. There were so many red flags and signals that I just decided to ignore. And it took a long time for me to come to terms with that this wasn't healthy or sustainable, even though everyone was looking at me and like praising my discipline and my consistency and like the transformation that I had made, although it was so unhealthy. But I was getting all of these compliments, which like fueled my ego because all I wanted was just like to be accepted and for people to quote unquote like me.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody liked me anymore than they did before I had lost all the weight. But I was just getting more attention about it, if that makes sense.
It
But it's
totally makes
like,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And that just like kind of fueled me even further to keep going. So it took a
It,
long time to undo, and still I'm undoing a lot of these old thought processes and patterns that no longer serve me.
I think that never goes away. Like I can think of so many, negative thought patterns or coping
Mm-hmm.
strategies that I've had in the past that, still linger,
Mm-hmm.
ongoing. But you hit on something really interesting that like the feedback of that external feedback is so overshadowing to the internal turmoil that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Because like anyone who's done anything, quote unquote, all wrong,
Yeah.
it's wrong when you're doing it, right? You know that in order to get in shape, you don't need to be doing 2 hours of cardio a day. Like, exception to stepping on stage, that might.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're doing things wrong. But if you're getting this constant positive feedback of, hey, you look great, awesome work, that completely throws the way you feel out the window because you're
Absolutely.
being told that it's like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you work with women like to identify those things? Because I mean, I'm specifying women because that's your target audience, but I think men
Mm-hmm.
and women both deal with this sort of thing.
Yeah. Body image struggles are real, and they happen. They come in, and the noise can be so loud. I think for me, it's not so much about getting rid of the noise completely, but how do we reduce it? How do we quiet the noise a little bit more, and how do we work through that? So some of the techniques that I'll use with my clients is when I am having a negative body image thought come through, I'll say, okay, how can we flip the script on that and say something positive about ourselves that has nothing to do with our body image or what we look like. So it's like, "Oh, I look fat today." Can we flip that and say like, "I'm such a good friend and partner." Right? Easier said than done, but I think it's reframing our
That's
mindset
hard.
around how we feel about ourselves, which is very hard. It's easier said than done, absolutely. And I catch myself doing it quite often, but that's one of the ways that I'll work with my clients on just reframing some of the thoughts that we're having from a negative to a more positive. Now, I'm not saying that we have to be positive all the time because
Right.
being positive all the time is futile. That's just unrealistic. But
Yeah.
I think sitting in that, recognizing it, and then being able to move forward from it is the most important thing rather than stewing and staying stuck there.
Or even pushing it down. I
Yeah,
think I think that could be
exactly.
just equally as bad, just pushing it
Yeah.
down and gritting
Mhm.
through it. And that
Mhm.
feeds into the second point from what you were speaking about earlier that I wanted to highlight.
Mhm.
It's one of my biggest issues with like the David Goggins crowd It's this personal progression from a place of self-hatred versus
Mm,
a place of self-love.
mm-hmm.
It's like I want to train and push myself to be the best version of myself, not because I hate who I am now, but
Mm-hmm.
because I know I can be better.
Right.
That's such a more powerful position to approach problems from.
Absolutely.
Like I read his book just to give him the benefit of the doubt, but it just made me dislike him even more. Um, Talk to me a little bit about where that comment came from. This place of self love versus self hatred, and how you know we all work and battle these sorts of things.
Yeah, I don't think it's an uncommon thing. I think it's just natural for us to gravitate towards the negative. It's a lot easier to gravitate towards the negative than it is the positive. It takes work. And we're constantly doing the work, and I tell my clients this. It's like a weight loss journey, right? When you hit a certain milestone within your weight loss journey, it's like the work doesn't stop there. Like you have to now work even harder to maintain what you've just built, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think growing up and being in a sport where you were highly judged based on your performance, your body image, your costumes, how you look, it that then carried over into my adult life. And then when I was getting all of that praise of like, oh my god, you look great, like what are you doing, keep doing what you're
Mm,
doing, like that just brought me back to my childhood, and my inner child came out of like, wow, I'm getting praise, I'm getting accepted. Like I was feeding off of that external validation because that's what I was so used to getting, and when I wasn't getting that, then I felt like shit about myself. So now I've tried to give myself that internal validation rather than trying to seek it from others, because that's just not healthy. And when you don't receive that from others, then again that starts to spiral and trickle in again of like, oh, I must not be doing something right, or I must feel like shit. It's like, no, like I can build myself up and I don't need to rely on the opinions of others to make me feel good. You know what I mean?
oh, I totally know what you mean, and it's probably one of the most challenging things. I kind of refer to that as a maturity of sorts when it comes to
Mhm.
especially strength sports, where you're not always going to set PRs. You're not always going to have that big platform victory, but you still got to show up. You still got to put the work in, and knowing that you are working towards something that is yours and yours alone. I think that's hard because I think we
Mhm.
all get into, especially when it comes to strength sports and lifting. I think we all get into it because we're a little insecure,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's, you yourself, you started training really hard because you wanted to change your body image. I wanted to do the same so I could get a date. So it's like, it's coming from a place potentially of self hatred, but
Mhm.
learning to reframe that into self love and getting that internal validation along the way is very, very challenging.
Mhm.
And truthfully, the barbell was the thing that did it for me
Mhm.
because the bar didn't care what I looked like.
Mm-mm.
The bar has, have you ever heard the, I guess it's an essay, but it's kind of written as a poem. It's called The Iron by Henry Rollins.
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
It's worth a read. So essentially, like, it starts off it's like the bar doesn't lie. 200 pounds is always 200 pounds.
Mm,
Right? So it
mm,
doesn't matter if you're having a good day or a bad day, 200 pounds, always 200 pounds. And that's just something that always stuck with me. And it seems like you use strength training as like the primary vehicle for the change that you make in your clients.
absolutely. And I have seen what it has done for a lot of my clients within my lifting programs, and just like the camaraderie that it's created and the community. And I feel like as women, we oftentimes are pitted against each other, or we're meant to have like jealousy or want what someone else is wanting. But just within these group programs, it's like everyone supports one another, everyone encourages one another, everyone is there for the same reasons. And it's just so cool to see women supporting women in that type of environment, because the gym is already scary and intimidating enough for us. So when we can come together and feel like we have that support, like the energy is just unmatched, and it's been so cool to witness.
So what does that program look like?
Yeah, so I have two of my signature lifting programs. So my first one is the Learn to Lift program, which is
Yeah, which
essentially
I've
created,
seen. Yeah.
yeah, created for beginners who want to learn the basics of weightlifting. Essentially, I created this for myself selfishly because this is the program I wish I had 10 plus years ago when I was first getting started in the gym.
Yeah, for sure.
I would have saved so much time, energy, and frustration if I would have just had a program like this. So basically, we break down the five major movement patterns: squat, deadlift, bench press, bent over row, overhead press, and some accessory work. Because I find oftentimes people kind of know what they're doing in the gym, but they don't really know how to utilize a barbell, or like the barbell is scary and intimidating to them. So
For
I
sure.
want to take that away from them so that they can show up confidently and know exactly what to do when it comes to lifting weights. So I start with that one. And then when people graduate from that program, they have the opportunity to go into the lifting club,
Hmm.
which is kind of like an continuation program of the Learn to Lift program, where now you're taking all the skills that you learned and you're continuing to refine them while getting stronger throughout the process. So we utilize progressive overload programming so that you can actually have time to practice and get good at these movements instead of just like introducing something one week and then changing it the other week. It's like, no, we actually spend at least 4 to 6 weeks on a certain movement pattern so that you can see progression and within your form, your execution, and the loads that you're using. So it's I love them. They honestly, they're my favorite, and I love teaching them.
And so it's my understanding you have like a hybrid practice, right? So you have these in person group programs,
Hmm.
and then you also work as an online coach as well. Um, are the same types of clients working with you in person and online, or is it different?
Yeah, they're very similar. I find a lot of my one-to-one clients want more of that like healthy habit implementation, the mindset work, and taking things a little bit further. Whereas within my group programs, it's more so structured around like, yeah, you come to that session, you're training within that session. We have a group chat outside of the sessions where we can converse and talk about how the lifts and the sessions went. But my one-to-one coaching is a lot more high touch, and we work on things more than just like the movement and the lifting aspect. There's a lot more entailed with that.
So you mentioned earlier that you want to get people away from diet culture, get people away from the scale. I mean, online coaching is a very metric driven endeavor typically.
Hmm.
So how have you created a framework that allows you to serve your vision while being limited to an online domain?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to preface by saying that I have nothing wrong or no hatred against using those types of things as tools. So, like, again, the scale and weighing yourself and taking progress pictures can be completely neutral for people, and they can have no emotion centered around that. But for other people, it can be really triggering because maybe they've had an unhealthy relationship with the scale in the past. They've seen the scale go up and then they want to go slash their calories and go add on, 2 hours of cardio. And that's kind of where I was coming from when I was going through my disordered eating and unhealthy exercising patterns. Is I had this unhealthy relationship with the scale and weighing myself. And um so going back to your question, we utilize like different practices in the sense of like, how are you feeling? So within my check-ins with my clients, we look at the five different pillars of health. So how is your stress management? What are we working on in terms of your stress management? Have we seen improvements in your stress? What does your nutrition look like? Are we getting enough protein in? Are we eating enough fruits and vegetables? What's our fiber intake look like? Um, our water, what's our water consumption like? Are you a dehydrated plant? Like, are you drinking enough water? Like, we look at other measures of health to see if we're making progress. So it's not all just about the scale. We can also look at like, people will send me in their form and execution videos, and if we can see from day one compared to day 250 if there's progress and they're lifting more weight and they're feeling more comfortable with the form and the execution, again, that's another way that we can measure progress. So that's kind of how I've integrated that into my practice online, without being so hyper focused on the scale and progress pictures and taking our measurements. Not to again to say those things are bad. It's just not something that we focus so heavily on within my practice.
I don't think anything's good or bad. Like that's
Yeah.
probably, I mean, if there was one one thing that I will like one hill I will die on is that there's no such thing as a good or bad thing. Good or bad
Mhm.
is the meaning that we attach to them. And
Absolutely.
what might serve, like, I have some very type A clients that if I took away their metrics,
Mhm.
they would implode.
Mhm.
But
Which
then
I can believe.
I have other clients that I work with. One that comes to the top of my mind, who she refuses to weigh herself and refuses to count macros,
Mm.
but wants to improve her nutrition.
Mhm.
So how do we do that? Like, I think this is a beautiful thing about online coaching and coaching
Mhm.
in general, is that there's so much art to it, because ultimately we're just problem solvers. And you've noticed that in your practice, the women that you feel most called to help are the ones that perhaps are triggered by the scale, are triggered by biometric tracking.
Mhm.
So, and there's also, like, I think this is something that you could speak on too, like the connection to your body and the emotional needs that you have surrounding food are going to impact your dietary habits to a large degree. So why not dive
Mhm.
into that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like you said, coaching is an art, and being able to tailor to individual needs and what people need, I think, is really important. What's going to serve one person may not serve another person the same way. So again, I do classify myself as very type A, people pleasing perfectionist. I'm trying to become more of a recovering in that aspect. But yeah, like I would weigh myself like 3 times a day. And if the scale went up, like I would go slash my calories and go run on the treadmill even longer. Now, I will say that I do weigh myself sometimes, infrequently, and I have no emotional attachment to it anymore. I'm just like, oh, it's a number. That's my body in space. Like, I really don't care about that because I know how I'm feeling. I know how good I feel in my clothes. I know that I'm showing up as probably one of the better versions of myself, even though I'm 30 pounds heavier on the scale than I was, 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I think just being able to do a lot of work around that and knowing that my worth is not tied to that number.
Okay, here's a question for you, just because I
Hmm.
love playing devil's advocate.
Yes.
Yeah, the question I always ask my clients is like, if you had the body of your dreams, but you weighed 700 pounds,
Hmm.
would that change the way that you looked at yourself?
Right.
Now, what if let's flip it around. Let's
Hmm.
use realistic numbers. Okay. So
Sure.
what if
Hmm.
you had you weren't really happy with your body, but
Hmm.
you felt amazing. You performed to the best of your abilities,
Hmm.
but you just hated the way that you look.
Hmm.
That's that's a challenging problem to get to, because
Hmm.
how you feel about your body plays a huge role.
Absolutely.
How do you attack that sort of problem?
Yeah, that's a challenging one for sure. Again, I think it comes to down to a lot of self love and asking yourself questions and diving deeper, right? It's not just about the surface level stuff. And some of this stuff I firmly will say is out of my scope of practice. Like,
Okay.
I think at that point, if we're talking more like along the lines of disordered eating or presenting symptoms of an eating disorder, then that's when I would definitely like refer out, um, or get
Sign of a
another
true
opinion.
professional.
Yeah, because I recognize that I can't help everyone to the same capacity. All I know is within my own skill set, and I utilize
Mhm.
that to the best that I can. And I know that when it comes to certain things, there's things that are outside my scope of practice, and I want to see this individual get the best care and help that they can. So, yeah, I think it depends. It's a slippery slope for sure, but we work through it as best as we can.
Yeah, so I want to talk through this example because I think it's an important one, because
Hmm.
I think the way that you answered it was assuming that that person. Let's use realistic examples. You have a 5'5" female who is 120 pounds.
Hmm.
Obviously, this woman is not going to be over fat, but she feels great. She's performing well, but she hates the way that she looks.
That's
That's a
interesting.
much different
Hmm.
avatar than a woman who's 5'5", 200 pounds,
Hmm.
feels great, performs well, but doesn't like the way that she looks.
Hmm.
You would assume on one end, that 120 pound female, you're probably dealing with some eating disorder behavior and some deep emotional issues that you may want to refer out.
Mm-hmm.
But I would look at that 200-pound, most likely over fat female,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say, well, if she doesn't like the way that she looks, but she's performing and feeling well, could we not start to move her into a deficit? Because I think the listeners to the podcast from this point might look at the way that you've been speaking about your practice and say, like, well, she's just keeping everybody at maintenance. She's not
Mm-hmm.
helping transform these physiques.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I personally know that you are.
To an extent, I wouldn't say that my practice really focuses on so much of the physical transformation. I don't call myself
Okay.
like a physique coach, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So a lot of it is based on, yeah, like how can we, I guess, work through allowing ourselves to feel our best mind, body, and soul. And yeah, I very rarely have clients who come to me, they're like, I want to go into a deficit or I want to change the way I look. It's more so about building strength and
Okay.
seeing how our bodies be able to change from that. Like, not many of my clients come to me for aesthetic reasons. Yes, we want to build muscle and we want to look strong. Those are great. But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that I do a whole lot of like physique transformations, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. That actually surprises me because
Mm-hmm.
I would envision that the majority of the clients coming to you initially would come to you be like, "Hey, I want to lose weight." Which is
I have had
honestly
a
what
few. Mhm.
most coaches, the
Mhm.
majority of their clients come to them are like, "Hey, I want to lose weight."
Mhm. And to me, that doesn't resonate with me super well because I one thing I'll ask my like prospect clients is, okay, what if you were to get stronger, feel better, start sleeping better, improve your nutrition, manage your stress, but the number on the scale didn't change? Like, how would you feel about that? And some people are like, "Well, I'd be pissed." Like
So
I
that's not your ideal client
that's
then.
not my ideal client. No, and I'm like, "Okay, well,
Interesting.
I don't want to have you feel disappointed by not seeing the scale go down then. I'm not the right person for you to work with, and that's okay." I'm like, "I can gladly refer you to someone else." And then I'll ask another prospect and they'll be like, "No, I don't give a shit about the scale. Like if nothing changes in that sense, like I'm okay with that. I just want to feel better. I want to start moving my body. I want to feel capable. I want to be independent until I'm 90 years old." So that's more the client that kind of ideal for me and resonates most within my practice.
Okay, then the question would become, what if someone comes to you and says like, "Hey, I want to lose weight," but
Mhm.
you obviously through the process of having a discussion realize that it probably isn't weight loss that this person is after.
Mhm.
Would you be working with somebody to kind of get them to a point where they weren't looking at weight loss, but they initially came to you for that?
Yeah, I have had some people who are open to the process of like shifting their mindset around weight loss and like losing weight. Again, I don't have anything against those things. It's just not the main thing that we focus on within my practice. So, yeah, we will work through like being able to shift that mindset of like I just came in so hyper focused of wanting to change my external appearance and my body weight, and now I'm focused on like building strength, lifting more loads, feeling more confident under the barbell, showing up for myself, making promises to myself, and all of these other things that come from living a healthy and active lifestyle.
What strikes me as funny is that if you were to do all of those things, it would
Hmm.
stand to reason that the scale would change by proxy.
Absolutely, and that's what I said. I'm like, for majority of people, when you're not focusing on it so much, that's when it happens just naturally, right? I'm like, not to say that these things can't happen. It might happen, but if it doesn't, like, are you going to be disappointed by that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that I talk to my clients a lot about too is like, they'll say, "Well, I want to lose weight." And I'm like, "Okay, like maybe, but let's focus on prioritizing some single ingredient whole foods,
Hmm.
managing our hunger levels, learning to listen to our emotional cues around eating behaviors." And then all of a sudden they realize that they're eating less total calories and not hungry and performing better and the scale is dropping. And
Hmm.
it's like, well, maybe you just needed some baseline habit changes and lifestyle improvements,
Mhm.
and you didn't really need to quote unquote lose weight
Mhm.
or focus on losing weight. You could focus on performance. And yeah,
Mhm.
everything you're saying resonates really, really strongly for sure.
Yeah, I think even within my own journey, like the last 5 years, I've gone on like more of a holistic journey myself, and my weight has stayed the exact same these past 5 years, but my body composition has changed so much. And like right now, I'm probably the least muscular looking that I've ever been, and it kind of hurts a little bit, but it's okay. Just because I've been working through some stuff, which has required me to pull back on my training volume and my intensity a little bit. But like I have never felt better in terms of like my energy, managing my stress, improving upon my nervous system regulation. Even though I don't look like my quote unquote fittest I ever have, I feel the best that I ever have. So to me, that's way more important.
It is, but has that shifted the way that you look at training now?
No, because I still love to show up and show out and try and hit for a PR sometimes, even even when I'm instructed not to. I'm just kidding, but no, I still love to train just as much. It's just I know I'm in a different season of life at the moment where some other things have had to take priority over that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I know that I can get back to that place one day where I'm training a little bit more frequently at a higher intensity. But right now, that actually makes me feel worse. So I've been basing a lot on a feeling,
Yeah.
which can be troublesome at times because there's times where I'm like, okay, is this a time where I need to push or is this a time where I need to pull? And I've really kind of been able to get in tune with my own self and figure that out of like, no, you need to get your shit together and you need to actually show up right now. Or like, no, you've been pushing yourself way too hard and you need to pull back a little bit. So it's definitely a fine line.
I love that. So I want to shift gears more towards like the business side of things because one
Hmm.
thing that has been very clear in this conversation is you've put a lot of time and effort into thinking about who it is that you serve.
Hmm.
Has there been an iteration on that ideal client for you throughout your coaching journey?
Oh, absolutely. When I first started, um, I just wanted to help everyone and everyone. And when you're helping everyone, you're essentially helping no one.
Yeah.
So I learned like within the first 3 to 4 years of having like my brick and mortar business that at the beginning I was just trying to work with as many clients as possible and get as much experience as possible so that I could figure out what it is that I liked, what I didn't like, and essentially who I wanted to serve moving forward. And I kind of looked at myself and was like, who is a representation of me? Like who is kind of similar to myself and how can I help and serve them in the way that I've helped and served myself. So, like I said, I work with like a lot of type A, people pleasing perfectionist, high achieving, ambitious women who want to undo a lot of those like toxic thinking around diet culture and how we view our bodies and exercise. Um, so yeah, it's definitely changed within I'd say the last 3 years. That's more so the direction that I've gone in and the one that I resonate with the most.
I think that's really important to note because I think a lot of people start off, I can help anyone. It's like, maybe. Like, I'm sure all of us, like, if I threw one of my clients at you, you could
Hmm.
probably help them in some way.
But I don't know if I'd enjoy it. That's the
That was
thing.
going to be that was exactly where I was going with it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've done that. Like I've done that. I I've taken on clients that I didn't necessarily want to work with, but from a financial standpoint at that time, I was like, I just need to work with anyone and everyone to make ends meet. And this is
Mhm.
when I was first starting out. And now I'm in a place where I'm a lot more fortunate to be able to be like, this isn't psyching me up. If anything, this is pulling me down a little bit, and I don't need this, and I don't want this for them either. I want them to be excited about their journey, and I don't think
Yeah.
I'm the person to be able to do that. And that takes a lot because within this business, things can change at any point, and from a financial standpoint, sometimes you're just like, oh, I really could use that extra cash right now, but it's just not in my morals to take someone on that I feel like I can't help just because I want to get paid.
Well, I think it does you and the client a disservice, which you alluded
Absolutely.
to.
Mhm.
I had a call with a friend of mine last night, and he's kind of disenfranchised with the coaching industry. And this is a guy, like, very, very successful person,
Mhm.
but he's kind of backed himself into a corner where he's coaching a niche person that he doesn't necessarily resonate with anymore.
Mm.
His interests have changed.
Hmm.
And a lot of what I do in my mentorship practice is like, I just play devil's advocate a lot of the time. And I'm like, well,
I believe that.
how are we going to, yeah, I know. Yeah. I think you've been exposed to that a little bit,
A lot.
but, you know, over time, we kind of get to a point where we find out who it is that we truly want to coach.
Hmm.
And that ideal client avatar is so, so important to everything you do, because if you know who you want to be coaching, you know the problems that they're facing intimately,
Hmm.
you know the way in which you need to administrate your coaching intervention,
Hmm.
and it all feeds down from that person. And I'm sure even the way that you like track data, even the way that you communicate, that's all centered around what the needs are of this type A high achieving female who wants to step away from the scale and learn how to get strong.
Hmm.
I'm
Exactly.
sure there was a learning process associated with that too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, this is going on 9 years of business for me. And I feel like at times I'm still just figuring things out. At times I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
And I think that's what makes it fun.
I think so. You're constantly learning and growing and being pulled in different directions and meeting that edge quite a lot. So yeah, it's a challenge that I'm always up for.
You also are one that doesn't shy away from seeking help and mentorship and education. Talk to me
It's
a
very
little bit
true.
about, maybe the mentorships or the education that you've pursued along the way to get you to where you want to be.
Hmm. I would say that I've never enrolled in a mentorship and not learned anything. I feel like every mentorship program that I've been a part of, I've taken something away from it. Even if it wasn't the best mentorship or the one that I was felt most aligned with in terms of like business practices, I always feel like I come away from mentorship learning something, whether it's how I want to run my practice or what I don't want to involve in my practice. Like I always feel like I learned something and I can take something away from that. So I've had probably four mentors within the last 4 years. And
Hmm.
each of them are different and offer something different, a different perspective, which I can appreciate. Like I said, some of them I don't resonate with fully on how they,
That was hesitant.
yeah, on how they practice.
Okay,
um,
all right. Let's stop. Okay.
yeah.
What has been the lesson that you heard and immediately cringed, and then counter to that, or like the advice that you heard and then
Yeah.
immediately cringed, and then counter to that, what's been like the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the worst was being told that I had to send 50 to 100 cold DMs a day to people that were just like in my inner circle in order to get clients. And it could be just like a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend whose aunt is their uncle. And I'm like, what the fuck? It just felt so
No fucking
inauthentic.
way.
Yeah,
Yeah, no
so
doubt.
inauthentic. And I'm like, you're not even an ideal client of mine, but yet I'm just trying to get more eyes onto my practice and what I'm doing. Like that just felt icky to me. And I did not resonate with that. For me, it's more so like nurturing and fostering relationships. And like I will welcome every new follower that I get to my Instagram or to my Facebook. And I'll just like be like, hey, thanks for the follow. Appreciate you being here. Like, what drew you to my page? Like, I just want to create authentic conversations. And if they roll with it, cool. If they are like, don't talk to me, then cool. Like,
I do the
it's
same thing.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
do the same thing.
I think that's the best way to actually instill trust and authentic connection with people, because the other way just felt so inauthentic and very overwhelming when I'm like, I have too much to do within my business to be reaching out to 50 to 100 people per day and seeing what sticks, you know?
Well, especially because, like, what do you say to that person?
Yeah. I don't even know you.
Hey, are you looking for coaching?
Yeah. And then they don't answer because that's what I do when people reach out to me and do that.
Yeah, then that's when you end up
Block.
in what's it called? The general mailbox or the
Yeah.
the message requests or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, thank you.
No.
Um,
Bye.
so what was the best advice then? So that was the worst advice and how you reframed it. What's been the best advice you've ever got?
I don't know if it's essentially, well, I guess it could be advice. So, I think I talked about this a little bit on my story this past week, but when I first started my group coaching programs, I had a hard time filling one class with 5 people in it. And now 2 years later, we've added 3 more sessions of 7 people in each one, and then my additional Learn to Lift program. So 28 people um, total that I can take. And at the beginning of the year, my goal was to fill my group programs. Like I wanted to work on launching and getting people into my programs because that's something that I was really suffering. I was really lacking and I couldn't figure out why. So my most recent mentor, that's what we worked on. And on the first day that I had my launch, I sold over half the seats, which is
Oh,
never like
wow.
that's never happened to me, which was really cool. And yeah, I firmly believe that we'll sell out this one as well. But yeah, my goal this past year was to fill those. So we went through launching strategies, techniques on how to launch, what types of things to post and when, how to create urgency, FOMO, all those things. So I just felt like I got more strategy based advice, and it has done me really well over the course of this past year.
One of the things that you know, I try to highlight on the podcast is the different ways that our coaching practices can look. Because I've had coaches on this podcast who do like exclusively just selling one-off programs. I've had coaches who do ongoing month-to-month coaching.
Hmm.
Uh, I have my personal bias. Like I personally much prefer a month-to-month retention model versus selling like cohort-based programs,
Right.
and that's mostly because I hate selling.
Yeah.
And it's just like I just don't like it. Um, is that something that you've had to adjust for? Because, like, I mean, full disclosure, like for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, so a cohort-based coaching practice would be something like what Mia runs, where there's a certain number of weeks associated with a certain number of seats, and then that recycles once every 3 months or once every quarter. So you have to once every quarter resell the service again and again
Yeah.
versus a month to month coaching practices. You sell a client on coaching and then they continue with you month to month until they decide to stop.
Yeah. So I do both.
Okay, you do both. All right.
Yeah, so for my one-to-one, initially, I have them commit for a 4-month minimum retainer, and then
Okay.
after that, they can go month to month. And majority of my clients, on average, I'd say stick with me anywhere from 8 months to over a year. Like one client I am with, have been with for 2 years. Another client I've been with for 4 years. Like it again,
Amazing.
it just depends. So I really do take pride on retaining my clients, and I feel like I'm not always constantly having to put out for my one-to-one coaching practice. um, I've been able to kind of put a wait list together. And when I have a spot available, I'll reach out to the wait list and see if anyone is interested at that time. But for my group programs, yeah, I do like the retainers where it's like either a 6 or an 8 week. But the nice thing about that too is a lot of the clients who do the 8 week lifting club program will re-sign and do it again and again and again because they want to continue to challenge themselves and make progress. That they also know after 8 weeks they're not going to become, the strongest version of themselves in just an 8 week time period. We know that doing this consistently over and over and over again is what's going to yield those results. So oftentimes, like right now, I think over 75% of my lifting club is returning. So I
Amazing.
might have 3 new people that are joining. So a lot of it is just the same clients coming back time after time and again. So it's a little bit easier of a sell, I should say, because they're already warm and they've already taken the program. My Learn to Lift is a little bit of a different story because now these are a little bit colder leads.
Yep.
And it takes a little bit more warming up and me talking about it a lot and showing up on stories and people getting sick of me to really hone in on the messaging and what it's about.
Well, I think that hits on a really important lesson for coaches out there in that if you want to build a successful business, it has to be one based on retention.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
It's true.
if you are retaining your clients month to month or retaining your clients program to program or cohort to cohort,
Mm-hmm.
it's really tough to fail because if your client list never drops, you're always growing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think lately the trend towards always be acquiring, always be pushing, always be selling,
Mm.
it's predicated on the notion that you have a very high churn rate.
Yeah.
And it's something that I try to highlight to a lot of the people that come to me for mentorship. They're like, I need to focus on client acquisition. I'm like, you wouldn't have to if you actually retained your clients.
Mm-hmm.
So do you attack the acquisition problem or do you attack just being a better coach problem?
Right. Totally.
Like
Mhm. It's so much
I
easier to keep clients than to try and find new ones all the time.
it is, but it's almost like it's almost lost on people. And I think that's lessons you learn from working in person. And I
Mhm.
mean, you owned your own brick and mortar facility. Has had that did that experience kind of shape your view on what a oh my goodness, on how to build a business?
Oh, yeah, that was probably one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. I was 21 when I opened that business, and I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I was just like, "Okay, we're making this much money. This is how much the rent is. Sure, we can afford it. It's fine." And at that time, I was working like 7 days a week, 12-hour days. It was all I did. It was I lived, breathed that business. And
Holy shit.
eventually, oh yeah, eventually I burned myself out so hard and I didn't love it anymore and I'm like this is not what I wanted to happen. I love what I do and the fact that I don't love this right now tells me that something's wrong. And I 100% believe that you have to put in the grind initially. Like I put in the grind so hard that I didn't know how to get out of it. And yeah, after it was 3 years, I had that brick and mortar, and then COVID hit, and it was right before COVID that we decided to close doors and rebrand. So now I've actually been the strength girl longer than I was my first initial business, which was actually called Aim for Fit, which I'm glad is
Aim for
gone.
fit. Well, hey, listen, what you just said is probably like, I hope that my editor listens this far and clips that because I was just having a conversation with someone this morning. Admittedly, he was very old, but we were kind of talking about the current generation not actually knowing what hard work actually is,
Mhm.
like how to actually grind
Yeah.
and knowing how hard you can actually work before you break.
Mhm.
And it's so much harder than you think it is.
Absolutely.
Like your mind will always stop you and you'll fall into these traps. And I mean, now we have so many distractions that will take us away from hard work.
Mhm.
But I can remember when I was working in collegiate athletics, waking up at 4 in the morning, going to bed at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, being at the
Mhm.
facility from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day.
Mhm.
It's like I didn't know any different.
Yeah. I was
So
very
I
fortunate at the
just did it.
time too because I didn't own a house. I lived with my parents still. I just finished university. Um, I drove my dad's car. Like I had no overhead or expenses. My parents paid for food. So my parents were like, "This is the time to do it, to really see if you want to do it because we can help you. We can support you." And so I dove right in. I took and it's funny because I had my $20,000 saved up to pay back my student loan.
Yep.
And my parents were like, "Why don't you invest that in your business? Like you can pay off your student loan over time. Like the government doesn't need your money right away. Like why don't you take that money to invest in your startup?" And I was like, "Okay." So that's what I did. I invested in my business instead, and with a little help from my parents as well. And I think I initially put in like 50K for my first startup biz, and then yep, and then after 3 years, uh, it closed. We went a different direction. And for a long time, I held on to that guilt and shame around that because I was like, oh my God, my parents have supported me so much. They helped me out. They invested their money, their time, their energy into doing this with me. And now I'm letting it go. But the reality was like we weren't going to survive COVID with everything being shut down and being a
Yeah.
solely in-person business and not really knowing how to shift or pivot at that time. I was just like, I can't, like I can't continue on like this. I didn't see a future in it anymore. Um, so then yeah, that's when I rebranded to the Strength Girl. It was March of 2020 and dove right into like my online coaching. And then when we were able to go back into in person, I then opened up that hybrid model. So now I do both. I have my online coaching as well as my in person, and I love the aspects of both.
Do you ever wonder, two questions. Do you ever
Hmm.
wonder what would have happened if COVID didn't happen and you kept
Yeah.
the gym open?
Mhm.
And number two, now that you have a hybrid business,
Mhm.
do you ever feel like you're shortchanging one over the other? Like if you put yourself fully into in person, that you could build that bigger, or if you put yourself fully into online, you could build that bigger?
That's a great question. So to answer your first one, sometimes I think about it, and other times I'm like, I am very grateful for that chapter in my life, and I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
To be honest, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself, and yeah, I didn't feel in alignment with what I was offering at the time, and I didn't know how to become in alignment with that. I
Hmm.
just didn't resonate. Like I said, I was trying to serve everyone. I really didn't have a direction or a clear business path. So it was a great learning experience. I took a lot away from it, and I'm happy to be where I'm at now. So,
I
and then
feel the
what was
same about my college experience.
yeah, exactly. I think you can be
Yeah.
grateful for something and not want to ever do it again.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly how I feel.
Yeah. And then to answer your second question, because I did so much in person when I had my brick and mortar where I was seeing like 10, 12 clients a day, that energetically took a lot out of me. And now I get to see, okay, maybe 3, 4 clients a day. To me, that's like my max capacity and what I can give energetically and make sure that I'm showing up for my clients in the way that they need to. Versus before, it was just like a revolving door. And it's like I was just going through the motions because I was so exhausted and I was giving so much of me. So now I feel like I have a great combination of both. I do a little bit of online and I do some in person, and I have my group programs. And I'm someone I like dabbling into different things. I don't see myself as one dimensional. I'm a very multi-dimensional person and I have different interests and I like different things. So to be able to incorporate some different services and do some different things within my business, I think keeps it interesting for me and allows me to enjoy it.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he posed the question to me: are you in business to do business, or are you in business to scratch an itch? And that's been at the top of my mind. And that was kind
Mm,
of the rationale behind the question, because I feel the same way as you. Like, I love educating, I
mhm.
love coaching, I love mentoring, and I
Mhm.
love that in my business I get to do all three.
Mhm.
I also fully understand that if I went all in on one of those,
Yeah.
I would make way more money.
Mhm.
But at some point, that doesn't matter, because if you're not loving what you're doing, and I think personally for me, if I only did one,
Mhm.
I would fall out of love.
Yep, I agree.
And so that it's an important lesson. And I know this conversation has been primarily like business focused, but I think it's important to highlight that your business can be successful even if you're not milking every dollar out of it.
I agree. I think there's so much more to success than just the financial component. Because I remember one year, I think it was 2022, I had made the most money I'd ever made in my whole coaching career, yet I was so miserable. I was burnt out, I was exhausted. And like, yeah, I made that much that year, but that wasn't in my bank account. Like, I didn't have that just sitting in my bank account. And I was like, huh, okay. Like I did that. I set a goal and I did that. And I'm like, this isn't having the impact that I thought it was. And I was just like, okay, well then why am I burning myself at both ends to try and reach this goal when it didn't even have the effect that I thought it was going to have on me? And this year, like I'm pretty close to that goal again. And I'm so much happier. And I did not burn myself out to the capacity that I did in 2022.
I think it also, listen, at some point, unless you are in business strictly to make the most amount of money possible for the shortest amount of time possible,
Mm-hmm.
I think your priorities shift. So this like long-term idea that, like, personally, I will always coach people.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of retiring,
What is that?
well, I don't think I'll ever retire because I'll always be doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So do I have to make all my money today?
Right.
No, because I'll still have income later.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean I should be spending all the money I make? Absolutely not.
No.
Although I'm really good at that.
Same.
Um,
That's why I still need to keep working.
but like, if you get to a position where your base expenses, I know people who are making 100 grand a month gross income, and they're fucking broke.
Mhm.
That sounds horrible.
That's awful. Yeah, no, not it.
Yeah. Anyway, I think the last question that I would have for you, looking at your business as it is right now, where do you feel is the next step for the Strength Girl?
Mm. My email list found out 2 weeks ago, but I can't quite say it publicly yet. I'm sorry.
Okay,
But
when are you going to say it publicly?
I'm hoping spring.
Oh, I'm not going to wait until the spring to launch this.
uh,
Okay, fine, fine,
I can give
fine.
you a hint. I
Can
can
you,
give you a
yeah,
hint.
give us a
Yeah.
hint?
Well, since I closed my brick and mortar, I knew I always wanted to have some sort of space again, but I didn't know
Hmm.
how or what that was going to look like. And that's all I'm going to say.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here. Nothing. You heard nothing.
Just have to follow me on Instagram and follow along.
Yeah, when we will have links to where everyone can follow you because I'm sure they'll want to be along for the journey.
Hmm.
It's you were the first coach who's been on here and spoken specifically about the idea that a transformation can happen without actually being focused on the transformation itself.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important to know that there are different coaching practices and there are different needs for every individual. And if you
Absolutely.
really dial in on who you want to serve, you can make profound impacts in people's lives.
Absolutely. I know I'm not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. I don't want to be, but I know that
Yeah.
I am for some people, and that's what I practice with then. So, if that resonates, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. There is going to be someone for you.
I'll also give like credit where credit's due here. Most people, when I ask them, hey, what do you do? They are very poor at articulating what it is that they do and how they serve people. And you were very clear on it. It was very obvious how you work with people. And I think that's something that the audience will learn about. Um, I have a few silly questions that I would like to ask.
Sure.
Do you crack an egg on the side of a pan or on a flat surface?
Oh, trying to think what I do. I think I'm a side of the pan girl.
Okay.
What does that make me?
I don't know. I'm a flat
Okay.
surface person.
Are you? Okay. See,
Yeah.
Marco also is a flat surface person, so I'm not
Great
sure.
minds.
Yeah,
Great
there you
minds.
go. He also does
Um,
most of the cooking in our household, so
well, I also do it. I do it mostly because when I crack it on the side of the pan, I always spill the egg.
oh, well
Like it gets everywhere.
maybe you just need to learn how to crack an egg.
Well, the way I do it's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
The next question I have: what's one album you can listen to, no skips?
Oh. Mm. Like right now?
Yeah, right now.
Probably Kelsey Ballerini's newest album.
I don't even know who that is.
She's a country artist. You'll have to go
Okay,
look her up now.
I'll have to go look. Well, I'm sure Liv will show me.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, what's the most embarrassing memory you have of my wife, Olivia?
Oh.
For for those who've made it this far, Mia and Liv have been friends for a very long time.
Oh no. I don't know if
Just
she'd kill me if I said
spill the
this on the
beans.
podcast. Oh man. Well, I think you know about this. Obviously, you probably know about all of them, but um when she was at the mall
Mm-hmm.
and she thought she had farted
Yep.
and she shut her. That's probably the most like, oh man, that was hilarious when she told us that.
Yep. I
uh,
remember.
yeah, that's probably the best one I've got for her.
Good times.
Yeah.
The last question I have for you is if there was one person that you think you'd like to hear me interview on the podcast, who would it be? The
Mm,
caveat being is you have to help me get them on.
okay. Hmm. That's a great question. I'm trying to think of people that I look up to in this industry and that I really like the work that they do. Um, I think someone who has influenced a lot of like my coaching practice and kind of how I show up authentically online. I'm not sure if you've heard of her, but Annie Miller.
Oh, I haven't.
She's a strength and conditioning coach. She owns her own practice. She's more of like an online coach. Just really authentic, like funny, just true to herself, doesn't sell her soul through butt selfies. It just yeah, I just resonate with a lot of who she is and what she practices, and from an authority standpoint too, she's killing it. She's badass. So I will send her profile to you and you can take a look, but I really
I
like her.
love it. Well, if you can facilitate an intro, that'd be great.
I will try.
I will have links to where everyone can find you in the show notes and all the things that you're doing. Mia, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a great conversation.
Well, thanks so much. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll catch you on the next one.